Okay, so I'm Liz Cracknell, and I'm a substance misuse nurse from Cases. So, as Dickens says, we work with young people who are using substances, but often along with substances come lots of other problems. We'll talk about that a bit more. So what we're going to look at is our use of outcome measures in the team and how we've developed a framework for measuring outcomes over the years. So first I'm going to have a quick think about why we would want to do that in the first place, and then what the challenges might be. And then we've got a video from 3 members of the team talking about their experience of using outcome measures and how that's changed over the years that we've been doing it. Down. Okay, so outcome measurement fits here. I quite like an ooh, because I was quite, I was quite pleased with myself. So, as the two that talked about respect for evidence earlier said, it kind of, the respect for evidence involves evidence-based practice, but also the collecting of outcomes. And we do that for different reasons on kind of 3 main levels. The first being, the individual client and their progress. So the outcome measures that we do at treatment start aid our assessment, they help us to make a formulation, and then they aid our care planning. And then ultimately, as we carry on doing the outcome measurements, they aid us in evaluation of the care, looking at how it's gone, and then care plan review or discharge. And interestingly, the evidence that's kind of compared clinicians, research rather, that's looked at clinicians' own clinical judgment as to how well their clients are doing, shows that actually compared to using standardised tools, they're actually quite inaccurate, and often they underestimate the amount of progress. So by using outcome measures, we get a good idea of areas that there's been progress in. The next level is at a service level. So if we're doing outcome measures, we can evaluate our service, look at what we're doing well, look at what we're not doing so well at. And interestingly, again, we found this as a team, but also Nina was saying something similar earlier, that when we looked at our outcomes for the last few years, we were pleasantly surprised. And they were a lot better than we expected them to be. And it was Cohen and Cohen back in the 80s, I think, that wrote about the clinician's illusion, which is where you're working with people, you're the ones who get better really quickly, you forget about because you only see them for a few sessions. The people who take a long time to get better stick in your mind, and so you tend to get a kind of illusion that people who come to see you don't tend to get better, or they don't tend to get better quickly. And thinking about the way we work as a team, we have a weekly clinical meeting and we talk about all the clients who aren't doing well. When they then start getting better, we don't spend an hour in team meeting talking about how much better they've got. So there is this tendency towards a bias to think that we're not doing that well. So that's been quite useful for our team, but I think the team in the video touch on that a bit. And then the third bit is that outcomes are useful in the current climate, and the way that services are commissioned. And our commissioner's here, actually. So yeah. And I'll say something good about the way that services are commissioned these days, which is that they do force us to say, look, we're about to invest some taxpayers' money. Prove to us that you're worth the money. And I think that's got to be positive for client care if we're now looking at outcomes and trying to show that we're good. And if we're finding we're not good, we've got to improve things, or we're not going to win the next contract. There is potentially, when you're using worker-rated measures, a bit of a conflict between these two, because if you think, oh, my job depends on these outcomes, then actually you might be slightly biased towards saying that all your young people have got loads better because you want to look good as a service, and that is a kind of a constant conflict between the two. Oh, yeah. I'd completely forgotten it was going to do that. I'll just do it again. Ooh. Dickon was very clear that a picture of this had to be in the slides because we were talking about our care planning. These are you probably can't see, but these are the Royal College of Psychiatrists' practice standards for young people with substance misuse problems. And AMBIT and specifically CASES's care planning tools are mentioned in that. So I thought I'd better, probably should have had some kind of fanfare as well. So I guess, this is pretty obvious. We all know this. When it comes to what makes a good outcomes tool, when you're thinking about which ones to choose, of course, they've got to measure what they say they measure, and they've got to be able to measure that consistently. We know that, but kind of equally as important are feasibility and utility. So, and to some extent, these are two sides of a seesaw, because the most feasible, practical outcome measure is the one where at the end of treatment you rate out of 10 how well is this person. But of course clinically and for commissioners that's not very useful. The most useful sort of outcome measure is 700 pages long that gives us lots of rich detail, but that's not very practical for clinicians to carry out. So the measures that we use at CASES are the TOPS, which is the treatment outcome profile, which is mandated for substance use services. So it's one that has to be done every 3 months. And interestingly, what we were saying about outcomes partly being to do with how services are commissioned, that kind of means that the completion of outcome measures is to some extent an outcome in itself, in that we get marked against how many of these we complete. And that makes us good if we've got 100% compliance. Kind of no matter what they say. Of course, commissioners are totally interested in how well we make people, but these days outcome measures themselves are an outcome. We use the CGI and the CGAS, which most of you will be familiar with. And then we use the AIM, which is the Ambit Integrative Measure, which I wanted to talk a little bit more about. And I don't know how many other services are using it that are here. Any? No. Okay. So
what is the CGI?
Clinical Global Impression. It's a score from 0 to 7 about how severe. It's used in a lot of drug trials. Because it's so simple, it's got quite high inter-rater reliability, but it doesn't tell you very much. But it's quite good about measuring shifts, clinician rated.
So the AIM is 40 item really global rating of 40 different items relating to a young person's functioning and well-being. And what we found in CASES is that, of course, it helps us in lots of detail to look at what we do well and what we don't do so well. But we also find that it tells us what we do, because we complete it at the beginning of treatment. And we can see with our young people how many of them have got problems in those 40 different areas. And I've got a slide with a graph of this later, and you'll see that it really shows us the complexity of the young people that we work with. So that's helpful in lots of ways as well. So it doesn't just tell us what we do well, it tells us what we actually do. And of course, as I've already said, the AIM, particularly as we do it at the beginning, really aids us in our assessment and then our care planning. So before we introduced, before any team introduces outcome measures, I guess you've got to think about how easy that's going to be and what the barriers are. So some of these are barriers that we've kind of found and that we have thought in our own minds as we sort of seek to introduce them, and some of them are from the literature. And I guess most of them will be quite familiar. So time, when on earth, with my increasing caseload, am I going to have time to do this? Then there's confusion and frustration. As you see, we use 4 different measures. That's a lot of bits of paper. And a lot of things that, some of them we do at treatment start and treatment end. Some we do every 3 months, so it gets quite confusing. A big difficulty is if clinicians don't see the use in it. So I'm spending lots of time doing this, but what's the point? Well, that's quite similar. And with client-rated tools, although the only one that's client-rated out of that list is the TOPS, how am I going to get my hard-to-reach young person to complete these and to complete these at the times that I want them to? So I really needed to get this TOPS completed by the end of this week, but they haven't turned up to their last, 3 sessions. And then the last one I think is interesting, and I feel quite under the spotlight. You know, what if these measures actually show that I'm really rubbish at my job? And also at a sort of service-wide level, what if this shows that actually we're not doing very good? Are we going to lose our contract at the end of the next couple of years?
So yeah, basically a summary of those views expressed by our team and others. It's about integrating tools into existing paperwork. I mean, like we said, the AIM is a massive document, but we've incorporated it into a simplified form that we can do online now rather than trawling through loads of paperwork. So it's about making something simpler and what works for your team. And it's part of our routine paperwork, so it's not something extra anymore, it's part of what we do, and we're sort of routinized into it now. Benefit to care planning is seen in time. I mean, yes, it is in time. We do look at the outcomes every 3 months and look at how things are progressing in our care plan reviews and adapt accordingly. It allows us to get curious about what we do and what we do well or not. So again, that's a good time for reflection, to look at what the differences are. If things got worse, if things got better, if they've got worse, why, etc. Like we said, completing the tools gets easier and quicker over time. We're very good at it now. We're very quick. It doesn't take more than about 3 hours now. That's a lie. Crucial to feedback outcomes to the team, helps us to accurately assess how good we are. So from a mentalising point of view, if we feel like we're rubbish, as Bernie said, if we're having a crap day, if we feel rubbish, we think we're rubbish, you know, but getting some sort of realistic view of how we are actually performing is really helpful on those occasions, and it helps us keep our work filled with optimism.
So we're just going to look at a few charts from the data. So this is from the AIM, and these are the, how many is this? 44 clients who we had AIM data for over this particular period of time. And each of the 40 items on the AIM, you rate from 0 to 4, so 0 being no problem, 4 or 5 being a severe problem, and anything sort of 2 or above is a significant problem. So this, up this side, is the number of items that individual had rated at 2 or above. And these, you know, these vary. The items vary from, you know, conflict within the family, physical health problems, you know, presence of psychotic features, low mood, substance use, and so on. And you can see that, you know, there's one young person here who had one problem that was significant, but the vast majority have got lots more than that, and their average was 9.8. So this to us really demonstrated the complexity and the amount of comorbidity in the population of young people that we're seeing. And just one more, this is for the substance misuse item. Again, this is 39 clients that we had data for. The grey line is at the start of treatment, the green line is post-treatment. So if there's no green line at all, that means the problem was rated at 0, so they weren't using substances at all. I don't know why I'm showing this, I think it's just showing off, because it looks quite good. And then just to think about future directions, really. We had a bit of a trial of using session-by-session rating measures, which are being used a lot in the Children and Young People's IAPT at the moment. Oh dear. It's that speaker, isn't it? So we had a little bit of a trial of them, and I guess it's earlier when our group was talking about respect for evidence, we were talking about kind of the interface between evidence-based practice and practice-based evidence, and that's what these session-by-session measures provide us with. And I guess we've thought about the way they fit with AMBER, and it's quite mentalising. So I don't know if anyone hasn't seen them before, but this is an example of one of the Scott Miller measures. There's another side to this piece of paper which is sort of saying how are things at my family level, how am I feeling, how is school, and how am I feeling overall. And then the other side is about this particular session. So how did this session go? Did I listen well? Did I get you? How important was what we did? did you like what we did today? Did we do the right thing? And overall, how did you find this session? And that's quite mentalising. It's kind of quite, you know, I have my own ideas about how this session went, but I'm really interested to know how it was for you, basically. And I wanted to show you this one because I thought it was quite neat, because what we found when we trialled these is that using these measures enabled conversation in therapy that with the young people that we wouldn't normally have. And in this situation, I was kind of, I try and look away when a young person's filling these in, so they don't sort of feel me going, okay, did I do well? You know, and I looked back at it and I thought, I don't get this. I listened really well. What we talked about was really, really important, but you didn't like it. And that's sort of the impression I had got as well, that I haven't done a very good job today, this session wasn't very good. So I kind of got a bit curious about this and said, so that's interesting. You've marked these really high, but this one's really low. What's that about? And what the work that we'd actually been doing was some trauma-focused work. And we'd got to the top of the hierarchy of exposure tasks. And the young person said, well, you know, the session was good and it was really, really important. I know this was important, but this was really horrible. This was not any good fun at all. And so we could have a bit of a conversation about that. And I think it was quite useful for the young person because that hadn't really occurred to her before, that this was really, she felt this was really good for her, but she didn't like it. And that partly helped to address her ambivalence about attending sessions in the first place, in filling this in. So anyway, I just wanted to show that because it kind of demonstrates how useful these measures can be. And I think this was Dickens' toothbrush analogy, that session by session measures help us to get to places in a relationship that we would not often reach. And Bernie thought this was more analogous to a starter at kind of to boldly go. So we've got a mentalising Spock who wonders how the session today went. Thank you. He works for the team.